Can everybody hear me okay without a mic? Because I'm not a lover of mics. So my objectives today, I want to increase your understanding of restorative justice, equity, and restorative practices. Those are three terms that we use a lot. Provide you with information about our restorative justice and equity group here in Bend. To share with you just a little bit about what kind of impact restorative justice can have on students in the schools. And then I want to leave you with some tips for living a restorative life. So as I'm going through these slides, feel free to ask me questions. That'll probably make it more fun for both of us. But starting with the essential questions, what is restorative justice? What is equity? What are restorative practices? And you probably hear the term restorative justice. I had heard the term restorative justice, but until we got into really delving into what it is, it's not a simple thing to explain. Restorative justice is about establishing authentic community, and it's a way of when there's discord or conflict, then restorative justice is a way of repairing that conflict and restoring harmony to the community. Its roots are really old, come from indigenous practices across the world, recognizes that all people are interconnected and inherently worthy. It values respect, mutual concern, and dignity. It's often been used in this country in criminal justice as kind of a diversion. That's not what our restorative justice and equity group is about. We are looking at restorative justice in terms of education. So for us, it provides a framework for creating just and equitable learning environments that nurture healthy relationships and transform conflict. And then the term equity. We added that to our name because we felt that that was just an important concept for implementing restorative justice in the schools. Equity means fairness or impartiality, unlike equality, where everybody gets the same treatment or gets the same share of things. Equity focuses on equal outcomes and requires that everyone gets what they need in order to experience well-being. And you may have seen this illustration before. Pretty good illustration of the difference between equality and equity. Equality, everybody's on the same box, watching the baseball game over the fence. And obviously for the tall guy, it's a perk he doesn't even need. Little guy in the middle, it's just great, and then the little guy on the right is having to look through the knothole to figure out what's going on in the game. So equity would take those three individuals and try to give them what they need. So you've got the guy who doesn't need a box at all, you've got the little guy in the middle who needs that box, and then the even smaller guy who needs 2 boxes to see that game. Now, there's really another step that you'd like to accomplish here, which is to get rid of that fence, to remove those barriers. And at that point, you'd be, getting to a state of maybe, call it liberation. Restorative practices. It's a continuum, so, and this is as defined by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Starting over on the left, you've got effective statements, effective questions. Moving more into restorative practices, you've got small and impromptu conversations, circles, and then formal conferences. And where we would like to be, where we would like to see our schools be, is 80% proactive and 20% responsive. And then this is another illustration of where we'd like to be working with kids, where we would like to see our schools moving. So this works also kind of as parenting styles, but the two box are also known as the punitive box. You've got real high control, real high expectations, but very low support. And then in the not box, you've got, which is also called neglectful, you've got low control and low support. So it's like, the teacher sitting at the desk and not really caring what the kids are doing. The 4 box is also known as permissive, where you've got real high support but pretty low expectations. And then where we would like to see people working with kids restoratively is being in the with box, where you've got high expectations but you've also got high support. And of course, it's a challenge to always stay in the with box. And then restorative circles, I think maybe this is my favorite part of restorative justice, is the circle processes. There are really 2 types, proactive, responsive. Proactive is more in the community building end of things. Responsive is where you're responding to a conflict and trying to resolve that. Key elements of a circle. You've got your circle keepers. We typically call them circle facilitators. And then the talking stick can be almost anything that can be passed around a circle, so that when people have that talking stick, they have the floor. And when that talking stick leaves you, then it's not your turn to talk anymore. And I like that because in a circle, it puts everybody on an even plane. You don't have the people talking over each other. So it's a nice way of creating a conversation. Centerpiece, typically in a circle you might have a candle in the middle, something to create a mood or to encourage people to participate. Circle agreements are extremely important. So these would be kind of basic circle agreements. You could add to these as you wanted to, but respect the talking piece. So if somebody has a talking piece, you know they have the floor. Listen from the heart. I think I'm a bad listener. That's me. I know that's something I have to really work on. But listening from the heart, trying to listen with empathy, trying to really hear what people are saying, rather than thinking in your head, what am I going to say next? Speaking from the heart and trusting that you will know what to say. Trust the process. Say just enough so you're contributing to the circle, but you're not dominating. And then really important, keep confidentiality. So what is said in the circle stays in the circle. When we're working with kids, these are agreements that we would go through with them and make sure that they understand and commit to before we begin a circle process. And then the 2 types of circles, proactive, should be about 80% of the work that we're trying to do in a school. They're intentional, can allow for participants to take risks as the community builds and they feel comfortable. Building trust and social capital. Proactive circles include but aren't limited to creating norms. You could create norms for a classroom using a circle. Community building. You can use it for course content. You could actually, as a teacher, be teaching a concept using the circle. And playing games. And you know, as a teacher, I'll tell you, I didn't know this stuff, but I taught a lot in a circle, because it just seemed to me that was a way to get kids involved. And then responsive circles should be only about 20% of what you're doing. They are intentional and address conflict and manage tension in the community. They involve everybody who's been impacted by conflict and tension. So typically, if you have a problem you're trying to resolve in the classroom, you've got an issue going on, you're going to have the person who's been harmed as a key part of the circle. You'll have the person, we don't like to use the word offender, but maybe agitator, the person who's kind of created the harm, and then the classroom will be your community that you want to bring in. So it allows a safe place for people to discuss issues as they arise, and responsive circles include but aren't limited to patterns of behavior, so misbehavior issues, interpersonal issues, grief, and loss. And formal conferences, which are way over on the right side of that continuum, those become very scripted. You don't walk into a formal conference where you're trying to fix conflict without first interviewing everybody involved, making sure that they're willing to be part of that circle. And then it's a very scripted process to get resolution. Okay, I'm going to try to show you this video. John showed me how to do it on the computer. If we're not successful, Karen, you'll have to go get it. Okay. And this is it, and the kid's passing that around. Also, I think what the woman said, probably a teacher, probably an administrator, she said restorative justice is more difficult to implement. It takes a lot more time than just simply writing a referral and sending the kid to an office. So, yeah, I think those are things that are important to keep in mind. Okay, now I want to give you some of the background on restorative justice and equity here in Bend. We are a volunteer-led organization, but we do now have 2 full-time grant-funded employees. We are Better Together Central Oregon is our fiscal sponsor, and we are a project of Better Together. We're governed by a 9-member advisory committee that reflects the diversity of our community, including 2 voting student members from our Student Advisory Council. And we did start very much as a grassroots effort in Bend. Initially came out of a COC Season of Nonviolence book reading that we were doing. We were meeting at First Presbyterian Church in Maryland. Burwell, a member there, was our group boot facilitator. And Maryland had heard about restorative justice and really wanted to investigate whether it's something that would be useful for addressing student achievement and graduation rates. So she invited a small group of people, including myself, to begin to investigate that idea with her. Actually, 4 of the 6 people who were involved in that discussion that went on for several years are still involved with restorative justice. We met monthly at Maryland's home for a number of years, and then eventually began to define our mission and vision. And this mission is already a little bit out of date. We had a meeting yesterday, the day before. We're going over, and I do have a typo here. It's to promote, encourage, and support diversity, inclusion, and equity through the successful implementation of restorative practices in our local schools. I'll let you read the rest of that. I think it's important that we are trying to empower students, not just students of color, but traditionally marginalized students, find their voice and a sense of belonging. And when we were talking about the mission in our meeting, I think it must have been Wednesday, we're really wanting to move that vision now, or our mission and vision now to Central Oregon schools. So that's going to be a big leap for us. And then our vision, we envision a future where restorative justice practices are the cultural norm for all schools in Central Oregon, where the integration and implementation of restorative practices results in increased academic and social engagement, as well as improved retention and graduation rates for socioeconomically disadvantaged students and students of color, and again, where students are empowered to develop and use their voice. One of our projects that we've invested a lot of time, energy, and finances into are the town halls that we do. And the town halls really came out of a model from the Oregon Education Association. One of the teachers in the district had gone to a workshop, and she brought that back to our group saying, you know, I think this might be a way to bring restorative practices to our students in our local schools. So we sent a group down to a town hall symposium that the schools in Eugene were putting on at Lane Community College. And then we began to plan our own town hall here in Bend. We did our first town hall symposium, Let's Talk About Race, at COC's Woolley Hall in October of 2018. And since then we've hosted a total of 4 town halls. We're planning our 5th one for March 17th. And here are some of the statistics I think are kind of interesting from the town halls. The very first one we invited, and it was limited or targeted students of color, so we invited 67 high school students and 12 COCC students. They came together up at Woolley Hall. In April of 2019, the students who attended the first town hall said, you know, we want some of our white allies here. So in the second one, we invited 68 students of color, 9 white students from our Bend McLean schools, and plus 6 COCC students. We had 21 circle facilitators and breakout session leaders, all but 2 of whom were people of color. Then just before the shutdown of COVID, we did a town hall on February 28th of 2020. And that one we got bigger. We had 116 students, mostly students of color, with about 41 adult facilitators. And then the last one, March of 2022, really restricted numbers because of COVID. We had 61 high school students and 8 COCC students, about 86% students of color. And here's some of the discussions, restorative circle discussions we were having with kids at the town hall. So I for some reason I left out the very first one, and maybe that's because I couldn't find the table discussions. But the one in April of 2018, we asked students, how comfortable are you talking about your race and why? And have you ever been in a situation where you felt you were being treated unfairly because of your race, ethnicity, or culture? What impact did that have on you? In February of 2020, we asked them to describe the first time they became aware of being treated differently because of your race or ethnicity. And then discuss what changes are needed at your schools to create a more welcoming and inclusive environment that would respect your culture and racial or ethnic identity. The last town hall, and I should say March of 2022, we asked them to think back to the first time you were aware of your race or ethnicity, share what you remember about that experience, and then how you feel about your racial, ethnic identity right now, what would be helpful to explore your identity further. Those circle discussions, typically we do 2 at a town hall. We'll have 1 table discussion kind of in the morning, and the students are in circles of about 10 with a facilitator. and they'll talk through a subject like that. Here's some kind of interesting findings from that. We do exit surveys, so when students are leaving the town halls, they give us some feedback. One of the questions we asked is if they felt unsafe at their school because of race or ethnicity, and 33% reported that they sometimes or often feel unsafe at school. And then we asked them if they felt like they belonged at their school. A majority of Latinx and Asian students said they felt like they belonged either a bit or a lot. 50% of white students, interestingly less than your Latinx and Asian students, said they felt like they belonged at school, either quite a bit or a lot. And then 14% of black or mixed race students said they felt like they belonged at their schools quite a bit. 57% said they felt like they belonged only a little or not at all. The other project we have going is, we're calling that our Community Cadre Project. We started the Community Cadre when COVID effectively shut everything down and we were not able to get into the schools to work. In fact, the schools weren't open. So using instructors and curriculum from the International Institute for Restorative Practices, we trained about 60 community volunteers and teachers in introduction to restorative practices and restorative circles in schools. Out of that group of trained volunteers, we have an ongoing group of cadre volunteers organized into teams for each of our high schools and their feeder schools, who are working to assist in implementation of restorative practices in our schools. And then, importantly, the project is operated under a memorandum of understanding with the Ben Lapine School District. And these are our teams and our team leaders. So we have a variety of people involved and working hard. These are services that they would typically provide. Planning work is thought partners with the schools, so sitting down with groups of administrators or teachers to kind of plan how they're going to roll out restorative practices. Working with individual students or small groups of students. We work with multicultural and diversity clubs at the schools. We plan and or help facilitate proactive and responsive circles. We plan and or facilitate formal conferences. We're conducting interrupting racism and hate workshops for the schools, and then continuing to try to provide restorative practice trainings. Our financial supporters. When we started, it was very grassroots, and you know, we started with the first town hall. We got $1,500 from the Ben Education Association, which is the teachers union, and we got a little bit of support from Ben Lapine Schools, so they provided the transportation. But that was kind of very initial effort. First Presbyterian Church gave us some funding. As we've grown and the town halls and the community cadre projects have matured, we're still getting support from First Presbyterian Church. Ben Lapine School District is very involved with our town halls. They provide both cash assistance in terms of helping us feed the kids, and transportation, which is huge. Deschutes Community Corrections has given us monies to help pay stipends to our adult volunteers. The Regional Educators Network helped us with materials and supplies for the town hall. Rick Uhlenhock, who is the manager at Office Max by Costco, that man is an angel. He has given us so much help with every town hall, and he's just gracious about it. So if you ever go in there, tell him I recommended you come, but definitely support him. And then we've received some monies from United Way, and we currently have grants from Oregon Community Foundation, Central Oregon Health Council, and Roundhouse Foundation. And of course, financial support, again, continuing to work on that to both be stable and sustaining. Our community partners are really important to us. We've done a lot of work and events with the Fathers Group, Latino Community Association, and Grace Bend. We've been involved with the Welcome Week events, for example, in Bend. We are currently housed in the Latino Community Association's offices here in Bend. And then our other community partner that we consider very important is Better Together of Central Oregon. Recent successes, I wanted to tell you what we did for MLK Day. And it's a first for Bend. I, as a mother of a son of color, have been looking for something to happen in Bend to both honor Martin Luther King and educate our community. So finally decided this year, you know, if nobody else is gonna do it, we need to do it. So we did it. We probably had a couple hundred people. It was a 4-hour event at the Latino Community Association's community room. We showed some video clips of Dr. King's speeches. We had a local panel discussion on his legacy. And then we did a community circle. So people in that circle were talking about, you know, how we bring that legacy to Bend, to Central Oregon. We just did a Interrupting Racism and Hate workshop for the Yells Conference. That's the Youth Equity Leadership Summit. And today, I'm not participating this afternoon because I'm here, but we're participating in a bias training for classified staff with Bend La Pine Schools. We did it this morning at Summit with about 260 classified staff, and it was really gratifying to see how much work the schools have done to bring their classified staff to a point where they are engaged. Well, okay, you've got teachers like I was who are what they call certified, but then classified staff are the people like who work in the office. They work as an aide in a classroom. Typically, they work, a lot of educational assistants work in special ed. And they are the people who really make schools operate smoothly. They aren't totally, or they aren't always appreciated like they should be, in my opinion. But it was really great to see them so engaged today in what we were trying to talk to them about, how to interrupt when they see bias happening. You know, what can you do? And the one thing we never want people to do is do nothing. And we heard a lot when we were doing Interrupting Racism workshops in the schools. That's what we were hearing from kids is, this happened to me, I went to a teacher, nothing got done. Or this happened to me, nobody said anything. So, yeah. And the school district has developed some really good policies around this, and they are, you know, that's their message to all their staff is, you need to interrupt it, you need to stop it, you need to respond to it, you need to let the person who's being harmed know that something's going to be done about it. Our future plans, we've got our 2 staff people that we want to get trained as trainers through the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Once that happens, we intend, we hope to be able to train up to about 400 community members a year. One of the community partners that we're looking at, talking to them about training is St. Charles. And then, as I said, our other strategy approach we want to do is we want to take this model throughout Central Oregon, but we want to do it in a grassroots way. So we don't want to take a program to Warm Springs and say, hey, we did RJE this way in Bend, you have to do it this way. We want them to develop a program that would work for them. So we're preliminarily working with a group in Redmond and a group in Warm Springs, but This is an area that we're really hoping to expand next 3 to 5 years. Okay, what brings me to this work? First of all, is I am the proud mother of a person of color, no longer a child of color. I came to Bend with Justin in 1994. He was almost 12, and starting 6th grade, we enrolled him in High Desert Middle School, and then he also attended Pilot Butte Middle School and Mountain View High School. And his experiences mirrored what we are hearing from students of color attending our district schools today. You know, racism, bullying, and othering. And that was despite the fact that I was a teacher in the district and could advocate for him. So, you know, you can imagine if you're a parent on the outside, that's a really steep climb. Justin is now just turned 40, and he is working for Buckingham Elementary School here in Bend as an educational assistant in a recovery classroom. So it's really fun to hear him talking about his kids and what he's experiencing.
What's a recovery classroom?
They don't call it that. They call it the ranch. But it's where kids who are blowing out in a classroom, they can go to take a break. And yeah, he's got one little guy who kind of lives in that classroom because he's blowing out all the time. But yeah. So I thought I'd like to leave you with this thought of 10 ways to live restoratively. This comes from Howard Zehr, who's considered kind of the guru, the founder of restorative justice in the United States. So his advice, take relationships seriously, envisioning yourself in an interconnected web of people, institutions, and the environment. Try to be aware of the impact, potential as well as actual, of your actions on others and the environment. When your actions negatively impact others, take responsibility for acknowledging and seeking to repair the harm, even when you could probably get away with avoiding or denying it. Treat everyone respectfully, even those you don't expect to encounter again, even those you feel don't deserve it, even those who have harmed or offended you or others. Involve those affected by a decision as much as possible in the decision-making process. View the conflicts and harms in your life as opportunities. Listen deeply and compassionately to others, seeking to understand even if you don't agree with them. Think about who you want to be in the latter situation rather than just being right. Engage in dialogue with others, even when what is being said is difficult, remaining open to learning from them and their encounter. Be cautious about imposing your truths and views on other people and situations. Sensitively confront everyday injustices, including sexism, racism, homophobia, and classism. And that's from the little book of Restorative Justice, revised and updated in 2015. And I actually brought that book with me because if I were to recommend one book you read, if you want to know more about restorative justice, it would probably be this one. And then certainly an invitation to all of you to join us. If you're interested in being on our membership rolls, you can contact our program coordinator, and you've got her email address there. Our website is Restorative Justice Equity Group, all one word, no caps, .squarespace.com. We hold our membership meetings once a month, generally on the fourth Thursday of the month at 4:30, and we kind of float around with where those are located, just depending on where we can find space. And the next one probably is going to be at St. Charles, but if you get on our membership roll, we'll send you the meeting notice. And then, we're actively looking for volunteers to join our community cadre project. Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Did you earlier say that the next meeting is gonna be March 17th of 2023?
That's the town hall that we're
Yeah.
doing on March 17th, yeah. And
Okay,
that,
so
that one's,
that is St. Patrick's Day.
yeah, it
Okay.
is, yes, yeah. We managed to do March 17th both last year and this year. It's kind of dependent on when Willie Hall is available to us.
Beth,
Yeah.
how do you recruit the students?
The students are invited to that through their multicultural clubs or their diversity clubs at the schools. If a school doesn't have a club, then we're going through, a principal or a counselor. And there are a couple of our schools that don't have clubs actively. One of them is Bentech Academy at Marshall. And Realms, I'm not sure they have a club at this point. Lapine is rebuilding their club. One of the things you guys may be aware of is that the pandemic really put our schools backwards. And so it's been a year of trying to recover that. And I could tell you stories that I've heard about, how dysregulated the kids came in, as freshmen to Caldera, for example. Freshmen and sophomores, they didn't have any upperclassmen yet because they're brand new school opening up. So they didn't have the upperclassmen to really control, the freshmen, sophomores, and the teachers and the principal there said it was really a difficult year. It was, the kids just were dysregulated. Yes?
Yeah, are you open for questions now?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm very impressed with the system that you have in the groups that you have, and I have some experience in working in groups with people who've been through trauma, especially first responders, police and firefighters and so on. But one of the things that we found out in doing that work was it's extremely important to be very careful about who you select to lead those groups and how they're trained. And I've offered training for people, and that usually takes a day or so just to get them ready to go and a careful selection. But you mentioned something about the training of these leaders, but could you go into a little more detail about that? I would
Sure.
appreciate that.
I can. We are not the only group doing restorative practices training in Bend and Central Oregon. There are a couple of, I don't know if you've heard of Culture of Care teachers out of High Desert ESD, but they do training like this as well. The introduction to restorative practices is an 8-hour training. The restorative circles practice is an 8-hour training, and then the formal conferencing, I believe, is a 12-hour training. And then what we do with our cadre is we have monthly trainings with them. So it's much less formal than that, but we're showing videos like what you saw today, or we're having them practice a particular skill we want them to develop. So the training is kind of ongoing, and I'm finding we are learning every time. We do a training, we're learning right along with everybody else.
To make a good group, you have to have good solid trainers is what I'm
Absolutely.
finding out. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're finding the same thing?
Yeah.
How do you implement it in the school?
It is implemented right now kind of on 2 levels. The district administration, superintendent of schools is very supportive of restorative practices. They've kind of rolled that out to the high schools. They have trained, I believe it's all of the principals, and have received restorative practices training and circles training, many of them formal conference training. And then we're there by invitation. So the schools call on us for help with, they've got, for example, at Caldera now we're doing circles with teachers. at Summit High School, there's a group of English teachers wanting to implement this, so we're working with them. So it just kind of depends on what the school wants. We let them know we're there, and then, you know, we do try to attend multicultural meetings of their clubs about monthly, so the kids know we're there as well. Yeah. Karen?
I wonder if you've had time yet to see if there has been an impact on student retention rates and graduation rates in the schools where you worked with students of color and low-income students.
I don't think at this point we've been operating long enough to really know the impact, and it's, as you probably know, very complex issues impacting student retention and graduation rates. I think what we have seen a huge impact on is student engagement. And particularly the students who have gone to the town halls, one of the things we're wanting them to do is get tools so they can take it back to their schools. And we're seeing that happen pretty effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, so this may be too long a question, but from the concept of restorative justice to where you are now, how long a process was that? And did you advertise yourselves to the school districts?
It was, we started the grassroots just talking about restorative justice in 2012.
Oh, okay.
And then in 2018, when we did the first town hall, that was really our first major involvement with the schools.
Okay.
And then we've worked with the schools pretty closely to develop the community cadre project. One of the commitments that the school district has made that I'm really hopeful will happen is they've committed to having a restorative justice person at each of the schools who would be, you know, in charge of making these kinds of things happen. Right now it's, you know, kind of hit and miss of whether, you know, people are buying into it or not.
One other kind of tag on
Sure.
what Karen said, and you may not have statistics on this now, but it creates a very safe environment. So I mean, that's your goal, so that
Right.
people can share
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
grow and learn and interact with each other. Now they hit the real world. And I'm assuming the book might be helpful to kids who go on, but I guess I could see some discouragement when they go into the workforce and there isn't that safe environment. And how do they handle those conflicts?
Well, that's what we attempt to address in the Interrupting Racism and Hate workshops is, you know, how do you effectively manage something like that without, you know, harming yourself? So there's the concept of calling out. So, you know, you've said a racist thing and I'm gonna call you out and say you're racist. Well, what does that do except make you defensive and, you know, up in arms? No, I'm really not. The concept, and I think I put it on the next slide, so let me go here.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and I think this is my last slide, but down at the bottom, Loretta Ross, she gives a TED talk on combating racism, and it's kind of the same philosophy that we're trying to teach these kids is you don't want to call people out, you want to call them into a conversation with you if possible, or you want to gently call on them. So the example that Loretta Ross gives in her TED talk is dealing with her Uncle Frank at a Thanksgiving dinner who's being pretty racist in his talk, and rather than fighting with him, she didn't want the whole family thing to turn into a brawl, she said to him, Uncle Frank, I know you as a really kind person. I know you would go into a burning building to save anybody. You know, I'm just surprised to hear you talking like this. And she says it really effectively in her TED talk, you know, I got his attention and I didn't offend him and I didn't ruin the family dinner. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to teach the kids is, you know, when you're faced with racism or hate, you know, the way you respond to it, that you have some choices there. That you can, yeah, Karen.
Do you have any examples of a scenario or a story from students where they applied something that they learned from restorative justice and equity and felt like it really worked well for them?
Yeah, and it's interesting because this came out of the town halls. The first town hall, the students from La Pine, and La Pine is a school I taught at, so I know that school really well. But it's a handful of students of color out there. Right now I think it's 13%, so they've really grown in their minority population. But at that time it was a handful of kids, and after the town hall, they wanted to go back and talk to their faculty, and they invited the students from the multicultural clubs, the officers from the other schools to come out and meet with their faculty. And they did a restorative circle with the faculty, telling them what it's like to be a student of color at La Pine High School. And I got to participate in that. It was really amazing to hear the kids' stories, and for most of the teachers, really an emotional, kind of eye-opening thing. There were a couple of teachers who walked away saying, gosh, those kids are whiny. You know, but you've got to expect that in a group, you're gonna have somebody who doesn't buy in, and that's okay. You know, restorative practices, restorative justice is not something you force on anybody. They have to come into the space on their own. Yes?
You mentioned superintendent support. But generally, what kind of support are you getting from the leadership of schools?
Well, Dr. Steve Cook is rather amazing in terms of his support for restorative practices. He actually came out of a school in, I'm going to say it was Kansas, that was very, a lot more diverse than our schools are here. And then he went to Coeur d'Alene, if you know his history, went to Coeur d'Alene, and that was not a really great place, I think, for him. He's come to Bend, and he is really spearheading a lot of the policy changes that allow for implementation of something like this. So I think his support's been great. And you know, as a teacher, you know, when I first heard about restorative practices, I thought, wow, I love that, but there's no way I have time to do that because I'm really busy and just won't work. Well, I think she said it well in the video that we saw, is either you spend the time up front or you continue to harm kids and you know, teach like you're blind, anything going on in their lives. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes,
But,
it does.
yeah. Yes.
Have you had any contact with the sister school district yet?
We have not yet. I think there's some interest out there. I've heard there's interest out there, but I don't think we've had anything formal with them. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys. And you will have my slides.